Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Matt Williams. I'm a tutor in politics and what is known as the Access Fellow here at Jesus College at the University of Oxford. Now, what do you reckon are the most common reasons people choose not to apply to the University of Oxford? Let me know in the comments if you've got any ideas. I'm going to go through what I think are the 5 most common reasons that people choose not to apply and try and give some reasons why you might want to rethink some of those reasons. Okay, starting off with number 1, the most common reason I've heard of why people don't want to apply to the University of Oxford is straightforwardly because they don't think they'll get in. So what people assume typically about Oxford is that you have to be some sort of natural born genius in order to be admitted. Well, as you might have seen from another video I've made, there really isn't such a thing as a natural born genius. There are no sort of obvious genetic causes for super intelligence, and that intelligence is a big old complicated mixture of tiny bit of genetics, but mostly environmental factors and choices that you make. In other words, if you want to be smarter, you can actually take some pretty concrete decisions to get up to that level. And also, you don't need to be a genius anyway. You don't need to be someone who has this sort of incredible capacity to change humanity's views on various things to be a serious contender at a university like Oxford. We're looking for people who are academically able, but not perfect. So if you don't have perfect grades at school, that's not the eligibility requirements for Oxford. So go and check out our website. It says very clearly what sort of high school qualifications you need. And on average, between 1 in 6 and 1 in 7 people will get in. And you shouldn't be put off applying because you're scared of failure or rejection, because rejection is just a part of life. I was rejected from Cambridge when I applied as a 17-year-old, and it's done me no harm because that's just what happens in life. You try things out, not everything's going to work out, but you learn so much from it. And you will learn so much from applying to a university like Oxford. You'll take so much from the experience that worrying about not getting in or perhaps wasting your time and effort in the process of it, I think are not particularly good reasons not to apply. There are many better reasons. In particular, you might not fancy the course at Oxford, you might not want to live there and so on, but not applying because you're scared of not getting in is not great theory. So have another look at our eligibility requirements. If you qualify, you should seriously think about applying because we will take you very seriously. It's also worth noting that a lot of people sort of flourish academically at different stages in their life. So it might be that you haven't been sort of top of your class or top of your year ever at school, and that's okay because you could be coming into your stride a little bit later in life than other people. Your intellectual maturity might be happening at a different pace, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. And it could also be that the school's curriculum doesn't really reflect the sort of things that we value in Oxford. So in Oxford, we like people to have done well at school, but we also like a slight sort of X factor, a little bit extra, which is a degree of independent mindedness and capacity for critical thinking. In other words, we like students that think for themselves in all disciplines, so including maths and chemistry and obviously things like history and English. And that sort of skill is not that well reflected in school results and A-levels in the UK, for example. And that's why we use interviews, that's why we use admissions tests and other forms of data in order to gauge your capacity to think for yourself. So it could be that you have the sorts of thinking skills that we value, but that hasn't necessarily been reflected quite so well for you at school. So please don't just rule yourself out if you think, I'm not the best in my school, I've not necessarily got perfect, flawless grades. If you meet our entry requirements, you should definitely think about applying. Please. Okay, the second most common reason why people don't apply is because they don't feel like they would fit in. So never mind getting in, they might not feel like they would fit in. And that sort of metaphor of fitting in is really interesting because it implies that you have to sort of squeeze yourself slightly uncomfortably into a mold, that we have a type of person at Oxford and we will sculpt you into that person whether you like it or not. And that is definitely not true. Remember what I said, we're looking for independent-minded, critical, creative thinkers. Those sorts of people fit no molds, and we would not even dare to try and put someone in a mold. And Oxford is vastly more diverse than many people recognise. So just to put a few stats onto that, about 70% of our UK domiciled students attended state schools, 28% identify as black and minority ethnic, 14% identify as Asian, 53% female, and 15.5% of our students come from the poorest socioeconomic backgrounds. I will link all of the admissions details down below. Suffice to say that Oxford University, with 25 or so thousand people, is a lot more rich and diverse than many people think. And crucially, we don't have an Oxford type. There's not a sort of mold that we'll squeeze you into. We want you to flourish as an individual. We don't want you to try and be like us. And there isn't a like us anyway. We're a very sort of diverse place. So don't not apply to Oxford because you think you wouldn't fit in, because we're not going to force you to fit in anyway. The third most common reason why people don't apply is because they think it'd be too expensive, right? Oxford's a very famous 900-year-old brand. It must come with a premium price tag. It absolutely does not. We do not charge any more in tuition fees for home students than any other Russell Group university. And indeed, because we've been around for 900 years, we have squirreled away money that we can help use with bursaries and scholarships. So we've had students come from very, very poor backgrounds, including basically having no money whatsoever, and they have thrived at Oxford. And in addition to that, our living costs are much cheaper than many other Russell Group universities because, for example, living accommodation is typically supplied by the colleges, and you don't have to have a year-long lease, and so you tend to save a lot of money in that regard as well. So actually attending Oxford can be pretty cost effective, and if you're from a poorer background, you can get lots of financial support, and we are very happy to give that. We also do not have any bias in favour of people who are from richer backgrounds, which is another mistaken belief that some people have about Oxford. In other words, that, you know, mummy and daddy can buy your way into Oxford. They definitely can't. Okay. The fourth most common reason why people don't apply is because they think it's going to be really, really dull, right? That you're going to be chained to a desk and forced to read until blood comes out of your eyes, and you're just going to have this pitifully horrible time. No, Oxford is a place of joy. You know, we love learning about the universe and the world around us. Yes, that does mean that we commit and we are determined and we put a lot of energy in, sure. So we work hard, I guess, but it doesn't feel like work all of the time. But we also play very hard. There are loads, literally hundreds of societies. There's loads of stuff going on and stuff to fit almost anyone's sort of tastes. As mentioned, you know, we're an incredibly diverse place, so there's lots and lots of stuff going on for all sorts of different interests and people to get involved with. So it's definitely not a boring place. In fact, of all the ways to describe Oxford, I think boring is one of the last adjectives I would use. Fifthly and finally, and perhaps slightly sort of interestingly, a common reason people don't apply to Oxford is because they think it's not good enough. Now, this is really interesting because to a certain extent that could be absolutely correct, right? Because what makes a university good, better, best is very personal, right? It depends on what you want out of your higher education. It depends on where you want to live, what course you want to study, crucially, how you want to be taught. And I can't possibly say to you that Oxford is the best university in the world because it depends entirely what's going to be best for you. And you need to be very careful with the university rankings, which might suggest that they can tell you which are the best universities in the world, because they can't. You need to work that out for yourself. But there are a few sort of myths that are still dying hard around whether to pick Oxford or Cambridge, for example. So some people would say that Cambridge is where you go if you're a scientist or a mathematician, and Oxford is where you go if you're a humanities or social sciences student. That is like 200 years out of date. I mean, it was kind of nonsense 200 years ago. It's complete nonsense now. Oxford University has produced more Nobel Prize winners in sciences than France and Belgium put together. We have the current Fields Medal winner for mathematics as one of our staff in the Maths Institute. The idea that Oxford is a sort of a slouch in maths and science is baffling. And conversely, the idea that Cambridge is a sort of not very good at humanities and social sciences is bizarre and completely wrong-headed. So don't go into choosing universities based off centuries-old myths which were wrong then and are completely wrong now. A much better way to choose universities is based on the course profile, the sorts of opportunities that you have, and also just gut instinct. If you've been to the cities, if you've got a nice feel for it, great, you've got more brain cells in your gut than a cat has in its head. So for goodness sake, trust your gut. There's no harm in doing that. But don't sort of believe in these old myths because they're really not going to help you. And also, crucially, make sure that you understand that when it comes to working out what a good, better, best universities are, it's up to you, right? It's up to what matters for you. And that could be Oxford, that could be Cambridge, it could be neither of those universities. It could be no university at all. It could be doing something like an apprenticeship. So make sure that you understand what those words, good, better, best, even mean for you. Okay, so there are many reasons why people may choose not to apply to Oxford, and many of those reasons are really, really good, right? I mean, Oxford is definitely not for everyone, but it is for many more people, I think, than those people even realise. And that's the point of this video, is to try and encourage you to think again. If you've ever said, oh no, I definitely wouldn't apply to Oxford, or I'm not sure if it's for me, make sure that you really think carefully about what your reasons are for that. And you shouldn't be put off by things like, I'm not an egghead and I'm not a sort of natural born genius and I don't think I'm rich enough and I don't want to fit in with those sorts of slightly posh, snobby people, because those things just aren't true. And you need to think again about Oxford, because we will take your application deadly seriously, I promise, and you should take us seriously as well. All right, I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, or if you think of any other reasons why someone might not want to apply to Oxford, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much, bye.